the girl who was born deaf and blind. The naming ceremony. It was a bright day in Ankaka, a small village nestled between green hills and flowing rivers. The villagers gathered, their colorful garments fluttering in the breeze, laughter and song filling the air. Today was a special day, the naming ceremony of a newborn girl, Maya, the daughter of Renes, and her husband, Kalu. Renes, glowing with happiness, held her baby in her arms as they stood before the village elders. Her heart swelled with pride. She had waited so long for this moment. She had dreamt of the day she would become a mother, and now, with Maya wrapped in soft cloth, that dream had finally come true. As the village priestess approached to bless the child, Renes glanced at Kalu. He stood tall beside her, his face calm but hiding the same deep joy. This was their first child, a girl they would love and nurture. As the priestess raised her hand, praying for the child, Maya slept peacefully, unaware of the celebration around her. The ceremony erupted into song and dance, and Rena's heart soared. She whispered to her daughter, "You will bring light into our lives, little one. You are a gift from God." But as the celebration continued, Renas couldn't shake a strange unsettling feeling in the pit of her stomach, a creeping sense of unease, one she couldn't explain. Third discovery. A few weeks later, Renas began to notice something unusual. Maya rarely reacted to her surroundings. While most babies flinch at loud noises or reach out for light and movements, Maya remained still. At first, Renas thought it was just Maya being a calm baby, but the signs became clearer with each passing day. One afternoon, Renas sat with Kalu. "Do you think she's all right?" Renas asked, a tremor in her voice. Kalu glanced at the baby, then back at his wife. "She's just young. Babies are like that." But Renas couldn't ignore the growing fear in her heart. She took Maya to the village healer, hoping for reassurance. The healer examined Maya carefully, waving her hand in front of the child's eyes, clapping near her ears. When Maya didn't react, the healer's face darkened. "I cannot say for certain," the healer murmured, "but you should take her to the village doctor." The trip to the doctor was a quiet one. Renas felt a cold lump of dread settle in her chest. Kalu walked beside her, silent, his hand on her back, and they approached a small clinic at the edge of the village. Dr. Tembo, a man well respected for his wisdom, examined Maya. His face was unreadable as he went through a series of tests. At the end of it, he turned to Renas and Kalu, his eyes filled with sorrow. "I am afraid your daughter cannot see," he said softly, "and she cannot hear." The words felt like a blow to Rena's chest. She blinked, staring at the doctor as if he spoken in another language. "What do you mean?" she stammered. "The doctor is blind and deaf," his voice heavy with sympathy. Renas felt the room spinning around her. This couldn't be true. Maya was perfect, her beautiful little girl. How could she be blind and deaf? She turned to Kalu, her eyes wide with desperation. But Kalu stood there, stunned into silence, his face pale. "No," Renas whispered. "No, this can't be." Dr. Tembo said nothing more. He had seen this before, though it was rare. The burden of such a condition was overwhelming for any parent, but he knew Renas needed time to process the news. As they left the clinic, the world seemed darker to Renas. The sound of the bustling village faded into the background, and she clutched Maya tightly to her chest. Her daughter, blind and deaf? The word echoed in her mind like a haunting refrain. Denial and despair. In the weeks that followed, Renas refused to accept the diagnosis. She convinced herself that Dr. Tembo was wrong, that Maya's silence was just a phase. She tried every possible method to stimulate her daughter's senses. She waved bright objects in front of Maya, clapped loudly near her ears, but Maya never responded. The realization struck her gradually, like a slow-moving storm. One day, as Renas sat by the river, cradling her daughter, the weight of it all finally sank in. Tears flowed down her cheek as she looked at Maya, who gazed blankly at the sky. Renas felt helpless, trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. Her husband Kalu tried to comfort her, but he too struggled with the news. He buried himself in work, spending long hours standing in the field, avoiding the reality that awaited him at home. Renas, on the other hand, couldn't escape it. She carried Maya everywhere, her hands swirling with thoughts of how she could make her daughter's life better. But how could she help her if Maya couldn't see or hear her love? A mother's unrelenting search. For years, Rena sought answers. She traveled to all the villages seeking out doctors, healers, and spiritual leaders. She begged for remedies, prayed to every god she knew, and followed every ritual and tradition, hoping for a miracle. But no matter how far she went, no matter how much she prayed, Maya remained locked in her world of silence and darkness. As Maya grew into a young woman, her disabilities became more challenging. She had learned to navigate her surroundings in her own way, but the loneliness of her existence was unbearable for Rhiners. She watched as her daughter sat by the window, her face blank, her mind lost to a place Rhiners could never reach. One evening, when Maya was about 20 years old, Rhiners came home from yet another fruitless trip to her healer. She was exhausted physically and emotionally. Kalu sat by the fire, his face drowned with worry. "We've tried everything, Rhiners," he said quietly. "Maybe it's time to accept this is how things are." But Rhiners couldn't accept that. She refused to give up on Maya. "There has to be something more, Kalu. I can't let her live like this," Rhiners replied, her voice trembling with determination. Soon, one of her friends hurriedly came to visit her that evening and told her about Father Alnus, a mysterious spiritual guide who lived in a secluded temple deep in the mountain. He was known for his wisdom and his ability to see beyond the physical world. People spoke of him in whispers, and some said he had the power to communicate with spirit. The journey to Father Alnus. Determined to find a way to lift the darkness that shrouded Maya's life, Venus prepared for her journey to see Father Alnus. Kalu was hesitant at first, unsure of the mysterious spiritual leader and what he might offer. But Venus had reached a point where hope, no matter how distant or strange, was all she had left. "I'll go with you," Kalu offered, but Venus shook her head. "This is something I must do alone," she said firmly. She kissed Maya on her forehead, fingers lingering on her daughter's soft, unseeing eyes. "I will find a way, Maya, I promise." Venus embarked on the journey early one morning, setting out with a small pack of supplies. The path to the mountains was long and winding, the terrain becoming more difficult as she moved deeper into the forest. She passed through several small villages, each more remote than the last. But whenever she asked for directions to Father Alnus, the villagers would speak in hushed tones, often warning her of the dangers of meddling with such spiritual forces. Despite the warnings, Venus pressed on. Days passed, her feet aching and her body weary, but she refused to turn back. She had come too far, and Maya's fate hung in the balance. On the fourth day of her journey, she finally reached the foot of the mountain where the temple of Father Alnus was said to reside. With a deep breath, she stepped forward and entered the temple grounds. Inside the temple was dimly lit by flickering candles, casting long shadows on the stone wall. At the far end, sitting on the raised platform, was Father Alnus. He was an older man, with a long silver beard and eyes that seemed to see through the very soul of anyone who stood before him. Venus approached cautiously, her hand trembling as she knelt before him. "Father Alnus," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion, "I have come to ask for your help. My daughter is both blind and deaf. We've tried everything, but no one can help her. I've been told you can see things others cannot. Please, I beg you, help me save her." Father Alnus studied her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing as he gazed deeply into her face. Venus felt exposed under his stare, as if every secret, every fear, every regret she had ever known was laid before him. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and gravely, as though it came from a place deep within the earth. "You were not here for your daughter," he said, his words slow and deliberate. "You were here for yourself." Venus frowned, confusion tightening her chest. "I don't understand," she replied, shaking her head. "I've come for my daughter." "Your daughter's condition is as a result of your actions," Father Alnus interrupted, his voice cutting through her words like a knife. "A curse was placed on your child long before she was born." The revelation. Venus felt the blood drain from her face. "A curse?" she whispered, barely able to get the words out. "No, that's not possible. I've never wronged anyone." "It is not your sins that brought the scars," Father Alnus said, his tone growing heavier, but the sins of your past. As he spoke, Father Aunus closed his eyes and raised his hand, his fingers tracing pattern in the air as though drawing the threads of a story from the ether. Venus watched in silence, her breath shallow as the air around them seemed to grow colder. Many years ago, you defied your mother, he said, his word like a distant echo. You fled your wedding, abandoning the prince of the village to be with another man. Your mother was humiliated, her dreams of lifting your family from poverty shattered by your decision. In her anger and despair, she placed a curse upon you, though you never knew it. The curse was not for you alone, it was for your children. She swore that any child born from your womb would live in darkness, blind and deaf to the world. Rena's heart pounded in her chest. The memories of her youth came rushing back. The day she ran from the altar, the shocked faces of the villagers, her mother's furious scream as she and her lover escaped into the night. She had been so young that she hadn't thought about the consequences. She had thought her mother would forgive her with time. After all, she returned to the village a year later, pregnant with Kalu's child. Her mother welcomed her happily and coldly at the same time, but Renes had assumed all has been forgiven. But now, sitting before Father Aunus, the truth sank in. Her mother had never forgiven her. Her silence has marked something darker, an ancient, bitter curse. My mother, she cursed Meyer? Renes whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. Because I didn't marry the prince? Father Aunus nodded gravely. The curse was born from your mother's rage. It was a curse on your lineage, meant to ensure that your children would suffer as she has suffered. Renes buried her face in her hands, the weight of the revelation crushing her. All these years, she had believed that Maya's condition was a tragic accident, a cruel twist of fate, but now she knew that it was her own past, her own choices that had condemned her daughter to a life of darkness and silence. Is there a way to lift the curse? She asked, her voice barely audible. Father Aunus was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. There is a way, but it comes with a high price, a great cost. Renes looked up, her eyes pleading. I'll do anything. Please, just tell me how to free my daughter. Father Aunus' gaze hardened. The curse was placed by your mother. Only her death can break it. Renes recoiled, her breath catching in her throat. Her death? She whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. You must kill your mother, Father Aunus said coldly, his voice echoing through the temple like a death sentence. Only her death will set your daughter free. The dilemma. Renes stared at Father Aunus in horror. Kill her mother? The very thought turned her stomach. Yes, her mother had caused Maya, but how could she take her life, her own mother's life, to save her daughter? The mother who had raised her even through all the hardship, who had loved her once, despite the anger and disappointment that had come later. The weight of the decision pressed down on Renes like an unbearable burden. She stood up slowly, trembling. I cannot, she stammered, backing away from Father Aunus. There has to be another way. There is no other way, Father Aunus said firmly. The curse binds your daughter as long as your mother lives. It is your choice, Renes. Either your daughter remains in darkness, or you take the life that casts the shadow upon her. Renes turned and fled from the temple. Her heart pounded in her chest, her mind swirling with confusion and fear. The long journey back to the village passed in a blur, her thought consumed by the impossible choice she faced. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the very earth was pulling her down. When she finally returned home, Kalu was there waiting. He looked up as she approached, his face filled with worry. Did you find him? Did you find Father Aunus? He asked, hurrying to her side. Renes nodded, her throat tight. I found him, she whispered. And what did he say? Can he help Maya? Renes looked down at her hands, unable to meet her husband's gaze. There is a way, she said softly, and the price is too high. Kalu frowned, confusion clouding his face. What do you mean? Renes closed her eyes, her body trembling as she finally told him the truth. The curse. It was played by my mother, Kalu, because I refused to marry the prince. She cursed our children, and now Maya suffers because of it. Father Aunus says the only way to break the curse is to kill her. Kalu stared at her in shock, the weight of her words sinking in. Your mother? He whispered. But, Renes, how will your mother do such a thing? I don't know what to do. How can I choose between my mother and my daughter? Kalu held her tightly, his own heart torn by the impossible dilemma. There has to be another way. You can't take your mother's life even though she had done this much to make you suffer. If you do that, you will go to jail and the whole village will tag you as the woman who killed her mother, he said, though even as the words left his lips, he knew they rang hollow. The choice lay before them, the terrible, agonizing choice. And now, Venus was left to face the question that would haunt her every waking moment. Would she kill her mother to save her daughter from the eternal darkness? Now the question goes to you. Yes, you. What should she do? Should she let her daughter continue in darkness? Will she kill her mother, or how long will she wait for her mother to die a natural death? The end. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this beautiful story. And sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel.